From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Banks, you called us in response to the military entertainment complex. And I think that was for our crew recording that episode was pretty illuminating, because I think we all kind of knew what was going on, but were you guys aware of the extent of it before we dove into it?
Not to the detail, right? Like you said, the wider picture, I think, is assumed a lot, but that isn't backed up with facts and the minutia very often.
And we got a lot of people who wrote in regarding specifically our episode on the military entertainment complex, because it's just as active as the military industrial complex, but it's not acknowledged near as openly. And the weirdest thing that I thought would be a good level setter here is I looked at the budget of the U.S. military, the official figure, which is probably smaller than the actual money spent. It's over $980 billion, which means that if the military was a country, its budget would be higher than it would have the, let me think. It would have the 17th highest GDP in the world, just above Turkey and just a little bit under Indonesia. So it's very much a country of its own, and it has the powers that countries have. So, Banks, you opened a door for us when you called in and told us this.
Hey guys, my name is Banks. I am ex-military, and I was calling about the episode on the military entertainment complex. While I enjoyed the episode, you guys missed out on one critical aspect of it, and that is the military integration with the professional sports and how it trickled down to college and high school and so forth. I thought that was a good opportunity to explain how the military got involved with sports in the first place. Thank you, and I enjoy listening to you guys.
Thank you so much for calling in. Several people had raised the same point. And, originally when we were diving into the story of the military entertainment complex, we knew that this kind of felt like a multi-part episode. And we stayed away from the world of sports, but you are absolutely right. This does deserve an explanation, because it's like, how if you travel anywhere else in the world outside of the US, you'll notice that there aren't pharmaceutical commercials on television. That's because they're illegal in much of the rest of the world. And it's weird that we consider it normal. It's also kind of weird that we consider it normal to have the military involved so heavily in the world of professional sports. The Pentagon has, between 2012 and 2015, spent tens of millions of dollars, $53 million, just in that short span of years, to pay these different teams and these different owners and these different associations to present the military in a patriotic light that helps for domestic support and, of course, helps for recruitment. I think one of the biggest surprises for a lot of people is, if you're ever at a soccer game or, football to the rest of the world, or, a baseball game, whatever, it's not surprising to see someone be honored for their military service, right? Like there will be a pause. Maybe it's like the beginning of the game or something. They say, we're going to pause to acknowledge our veterans in the crowd, or this specific person is returning from this conflict zone. And it seems very, sincere, and it seems very patriotic. Those groups are being paid to do this. This is a paid ad. That's what's happening. Did you guys know that? Because I was not aware for a long time.
I had no idea. I didn't understand. I didn't even realize that there was a connection between, the military and sports. It makes perfect sense, but it just it never occurred to me.
Yeah. It's kind of it's bad casting for me, at least, because it's been a long time since I've seen any professional sporting match. I haven't seen a Super Bowl in I don't even know how many years.
I think I watch it usually a little bit before and after the halftime show, because the halftime shows are kind of fun. But yeah, same. I watched the one that Atlanta was so brutally slaughtered in a handful of years ago, and they did so well in the first half. But then they just got destroyed. But I did watch that entire game in a very busy bar with a lot of fans that were sorely disappointed.
I dig the energy, but man, yeah, the Falcons, it's still too soon for me to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, so whether or not you are a fan of sports, right? And a lot of people, of course, haven't been able to see the games they wish they could have seen due to the pandemic. Whether or not you're a fan, though, what you realize when you ask yourself, how does the military interact with the world of sports, is that very quickly the answer becomes complicated. Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake were able to shed some light on this story back in 2015 when they introduced this concept. And for some people, this is perfectly fine. It doesn't matter that it's a paid ad that's purporting to be a sincere display of patriotism. But for other people, that deceptiveness is almost offensive at times. And that's really what the relationship between the military entertainment complex and professional sports could best be termed as, unfortunately, paid patriotism. There's no, it's not an anomalous pattern, right? Pepsi will pay millions of dollars to have an ad in the Super Bowl. So the question is, why should the rules be different for Uncle Sam? There's an argument there that I think is similar to our argument about the cons of the military entertainment complex when it's applied to children, right? Like you're a kid who loves basketball, right? And watching basketball games, and you dream of being the next LeBron or the next Michael Jordan. And like many kids who try to go into a career in basketball, the rate of attrition is so high that you don't unfortunately get to be that basketball superstar, but you have grown up seeing the military featured as one of the best jobs in the planet. Are you therefore more likely, as a consequence of that long-term advertising, are you therefore more likely to join the military? I think it's a valid question to ask. If you study this, what you'll notice is for folks who were around before 2001, this relationship increased by an order of magnitude after the events of September 11th. And now it's kind of weird not to see these sorts of displays if you go to a particular sports game. And sports games, of course, in the U.S. are already, they're very patriotic. You sing the national anthem. Even though objectively, I'll say it, the national anthem is not that great of a song.
It's not that great of a song. No, it definitely isn't. It's got some mixed messages in there. But, I mean, it's true. Like football, I think, baseball, in particular, those two really do feel like these very nationalistic sports. They're these they're associated with America and our culture. And, soccer's obviously making a big splash here now, but that's still, I think, largely thought of as like more of a European sport.
Mm-hmm. And there's... So this can be sticky, right? Because we're talking about very deep emotional ties that a lot of people have. It's your favorite game in the world. It's you may have served in the military or know someone who has. So it may be surprising for a lot of us today to realize some of the strongest objectors to this relationship are like Banks, veterans themselves. There's a great piece on WBR about veterans speaking out against what they see as the militarization of sports. And I'd like to read a quote from a guy named Bill Astor. He's a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel, and he has written about this multiple times. It really bothers him. He's describing how he saw these jets, right, that flew over in an aerial parade to like during a stadium game. And here's what he said. He said, "I think at first there's a sort of thrilling feeling. I'm like all the other fans. A big plane goes overhead. Wow, that's kind of awe-inspiring. But at the same time, to me," he says, "it's not something that I see should be flying over a sports stadium before a baseball game or a football game. You know, these are weapons of death. They may be required, but they certainly shouldn't be celebrated and applauded." What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it's like the idea of like maybe, I don't think people make this connection often enough, perhaps, but it's the idea of like using tanks in a parade. You know, it's a show of military might. It's a flex. It's like, look at us and fear us, kind of. Even in a weird way to your own people. I don't know.
There's so much psychology going on there. Because it isn't just a flex outwardly, it's a flex inwardly, right? It's to make the viewer feel as though there's power, because it is about the power of the individual somehow. Like if that's the rhetoric, you know, of the army or something, and then you're talking about adding tanks to the situation, these weapons of destruction and death. You're showing like what power an individual can wield, and then what those individuals together can do.
That's a really good point, Matt. There's a lot of symbolism in there where it is a show of force, both internally and externally, I think.
But you're combining it with, especially if you're doing American football, you know, basketball, trying to think, even hockey, any of these sports that are popular in the US, even sometimes baseball, you're talking about physical
Yes.
feats of strength.
Right.
That are one of the main things that lead a team to victory.
And an incredibly militarized formation, for example, in like football, where it's all about like the front lines and advancing. It really is like the closest thing to playing war that you could imagine, kind of like on that grid.
Yeah, I wrote a paper about that a number of years ago, which was a follow-up to the thing I wrote asking whether war is an economic necessity. It's to what degree do sports replace the practice of war, of tribalistic war in particular.
I would just say, Ben, it's certainly in this case, it's doing what you're saying, like replacing it, but then also using it to strengthen the other one psychologically, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, folks, there's there are some displays like this that I absolutely love. Like when the Blue Angels took the training exercise they already had scheduled to fly over Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, I went to the local park. I wanted to see what the business was. You know what I mean? In a very real way, I own part of those. I sure as hell paid for them, you know?
And just dusting us with those chemtrails, you know? It's never mind. I'm joking. But yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing to behold for sure until you dig down into it. And I think we've seen it so often that we're almost numbed to the point that Matt's making about how it is this kind of show of force. We see it as kind of, it's just a neat trick. It's like, look at him do the loop-de-loop or like whatever. It doesn't really feel like that kind of iron-fisted flex that we're talking about.
Normalized, just like pharmaceutical commercials. And of course, Flake and McCain are two more conservative senators. So their big objection to paid patriotism was the use of tax dollars. And they felt like these contracts were somewhat deceptive to people. But you are right, Banks. It is not just a big business, but it's a growing business. And for anyone who would like to learn more about this, you can read the 2015 report by McCain and Flake called Tackling Paid Patriotism. It's free to read online. And I'm very interested to hear everybody's remarks regarding the power of symbolism at play here, which is very real and profound, and what, if any, effect this may have. Is this like is this a domestic hearts and minds operation? I would argue yes.